The other is, I don't want to be hurtful to others. If this is a truth about our culture, and I think it is, and I heard a lot of verbal affirmations that there are women here who think this is also truth, and have been trained to be in this culture as a male, that means I participate in this process. I don't necessarily know how I participate in this process, and first learning that this is going on, but I believe that I do because it does seem to be true. And so I further read. Then I think, well, how can this possibly be? How can this happen? And then reading in the same body of literature that, and thank God, I don't know where you are, but thank God we do live in a society, and thank God there are feminists. Male, female feminists that write, that look, that step out of culture, that look at culture, that analyze it, that talk to us, that teach us to say, hey, we are all captured in this process, and if we're participating in this process, none of us have freedom, none of us have life. And they further, and they go on, they say something happened in the patriarchal structure that sooner or later there was this movement from birth, and there's this movement between these two beings, this mother giving birth, and the rhythms of the birthing process, and the rhythms of two bodies, and two bodies being held in a comfort and a movement that's good and that's healthy. And somewhere down the line, somebody interjected the idea that we are to reject that we are to believe this abstract belief system out here, whatever it might be, and this process, the first years of our lives, are not to be informative of how we live. Like, whoa, wait a minute, what does that mean? How does that work? I mean, recently, I don't know if you recall this one, Barack Obama was going to pick a Supreme Court person and said, well, this person needs to have the capacity of empathy. Remember that? I thought, yeah, about time, a little empathy. Do you remember the country's response to that? That's what I'm talking about right here. That's it. Empathy is a bodily felt thing. It hears your story. My mind and my body moves in hearing your story. And as I define empathy, a little different. Not only do I learn about you, but there is action that is completed in what I learn about you in an act of care. Empathy is a process that begins with learning something about you I did not know and moves me to in an act of care, acting upon the knowledge that I got. If I don't include that last part of the act of care, what I've seen in our culture is we can use empathy to learn about you and use it against you. It's an abuse of culture. For this reason, I believe, we reject the maternal, the earth, the body, and we label it as no good, to be of use. And you think, wait, Pastor, we don't do that. We're not a death-oriented culture. We're not abusive to people. This is America. Then I just look at 3,000 years of history, I think. We're pretty death-oriented. I mean, we would like to cry freedom and civil liberties and all those good things and put on clothes that aren't there and say we're dressed in freedom, we're dressed in liberty. Maybe we need to give the children a greater voice in looking at us and telling us what they see. We are a death-oriented culture. Helen and I were talking. This not woman, I'm confused. See, it's true. It's what's true. I don't know. You know, and how am I to relate? Am I relating to the people I love and I care for in such a way that it perpetuates and prevents the true expression of what it would mean to be a woman that I unconsciously and consciously oppress? I need to learn how that works. And so I forgot what I was going to say. Helen and I were talking about it. It'll come back to me. But I'm glad to be informed by a woman. Back to that spiritual experience of love and having that be a bodily experience, a felt experience, I think gives one greater strength not to be captured by a belief system, not to be captured by patriarchy, but to know that there's something other than that. When we have a culture that's filled with a symbol system that does not allow this true expression of what it means to be woman, and what that adds to us as a species, and that is hindered, rejected, and blocked, does seem to move us into a death culture. Now it's come back to me. We were talking about the medical practice and medical profession in our community, and it occurred to me that not all of the medical profession, and certainly I've experienced good doctors who don't, and we know Stephen Blythe who's not this way, but not all. But it does seem to me in general that the medical profession is no longer, or partially no longer, a medical profession. Because if I have a medical need and I go to a medical center and say I have this medical need, it will be responded to medically, medical profession. But if I have a medical need and I go to this building and I say, here's my social status, and in my social status, I don't have insurance, they say, you can't come in. That's no longer a medical profession or a medical practice. That's an economic system. And it's okay if you go away. And I'm not saying all doctors and all medicine's like this, but we have congressional testimony of people saying they turned down people for care that had every right and contractual right to get care, and they turned them down and they were rewarded for turning them down, and many of them died. I mean, that's congressional testimony. I'm not making that up. When that happened, it affirms that we have a death-oriented culture. Because for money, it's okay if you die. So these feminists are saying, wait a minute. Let's stop a minute. If we were to start our cultural foundations with the birthing process and the bodily kinesthetic experience of comfort and resting in one's own body, being comforted in that primary caregiver's process, and we just carried that on, and rather than saying no to that and let's build a culture that's based on a dissociative process, let's build a culture that rejects empathy, that moves toward greed. Let's not do that, but let's move through. We indeed could change the direction of ourselves as individuals, as I relate to people I care about in my love. We could redirect our church community. We could redirect the larger communities that we are involved in, and rather than be oriented toward death, affirming the dissociative process that we go through and that orients us to be a subject in this society, that we can indeed heal ourselves and move through that, and then begin to move toward a life that's life-directed, that affirms life, that affirms the human relationship, that affirms the value of what it means to be good to one another, that affirms the value of saying we want our Supreme Court justices to have the capacity of empathy. We want our legislative leaders to have the capacity of empathy. We want our local leaders to have the capacity of empathy. We want ourselves to have the capacity of empathy as we relate to one another. So our spiritual journey is somehow to have that bodily experience of being cared for and sense of being loved and being able to love fully, that there is a possibility we can get off that track that's death-oriented and we can step onto a way of life that's life-oriented. As human beings, it seems to me, that is our place. And if we're on the other track, we're out of place. So this is an invitation to help each other to find our place and to figure out how to be kind to ourselves and to others.